Hello, how are you doing? I'm a bit tired today because I was up late last night finishing a book which was so good, so gripping. You know that feeling of I can't go to sleep because I need to find out what happens in this story. So it's a bit slow going for me today, but it was worth it because this novel is excellent and so clever because the reasons for why I was so enthralled by it changed over the course of the story. And this was intentional on the part of the author, and it added to the overall meaning and impact of this book. So it's Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan. I'd love to know if you've read this book and what you think about it, and if you found it as gripping as I did, because the story is nominally a fictional journalistic investigation into the death of a girl on a London housing estate in the early 1990s. She's found dead with suspicious marks on her, and the neighbors and the police suspect another local girl named Lucy, who is seen playing with this girl that was found dead. And so she is taken into custody and questioned. But there's also a journalist, a very ambitious journalist named Tom, who works for a tabloid newspaper, who has discovered this case and set upon it and is trying to find out what happened, and so is investigating both this girl Lucy and Lucy's family. And they're an Irish family that emigrated some time ago. They've been living there for a while, but they've always been quite isolated because the neighbors are fairly suspicious of this family. And the journalist Tom, he's very ambitious and has a very snobbish attitude towards the general public and ordinary people, who he labels as peasants, including the readership of his own newspaper, and so he sees this family as a group of peasants, and he begins questioning the different members of this family to try to weed out and weasel out information from them, to try to crack this case and get the scoop on this story. And so the family has moved to a hotel to stay there, to get away from their neighbors, who are very suspicious and hostile towards this Irish family since this girl's death and Lucy's suspected involvement in it. But it's also the newspaper are putting them up in this hotel to keep them sequestered from other newspapers so that they can be the ones to get this scoop. And so we follow Tom as he interviews members of this family, including Lucy's mother, Carmel, who's a single mother. We don't know at first where the father is or what happened to him. And there is Carmel's brother Richie and their father John, and he interviews these different members of the family, and so we get their backstories, but the information that Tom gets out of them isn't necessarily what he wants. They're relating the stories of their lives and how they got to this point, which is quite bleak because they are all they're a very solitary family, and there's this melancholy air to all of them, especially Carmel, who's very lonely. We see a scene with her early on where she's looking for affection and companionship, and her kind of desperate attempts for this, and then we get her backstory in Ireland and how she came to have her daughter Lucy, and why she doesn't have much of a connection at all with her daughter. And we find out that the family was really being held together by Carmel and Richie's mother, Rose, who's this matriarchal figure that really brought them together. And she was the one that was really raising Lucy because Carmel wasn't interested in being a mother. But we find out before the events of this story that Rose had died, and now they're all the members of this family, the Green family. They are adrift and living these very melancholy lives. And so, as we get their backstory, I became so much more fascinated by each of their individual tales and how they got to this desultory point in their lives, rather than this kind of salacious case of a girl that is found dead, and did was Lucy involved or wasn't she? Was she the perpetrator or wasn't she? And that question remains, and it's really interesting how that continues to be handled over the course of the story and how the novel ends up, which I won't spoil, but it's really fascinating how it gets to this point, because it's makes me question, my own kind of salacious interest in these things, and when I'm reading newspapers and eye-catching headlines, and why do I read certain stories, and why do I click and open up certain stories to find out more about them, and which ones do I pass by, and I think it's like human nature to have such an interest in really fascinating cases like this, that are have so much kind of like juicy detail to them that you want to know answers to them, but this shows how there's not really any clear answers for a lot of cases like this, that a lot of times these tragedies that then blow up into these larger news stories are actually just adding up a whole bunch of accounts of people that have led to this situation and this tragedy, and how she explores their stories like this is so emotional and moving. And so yeah, I became really enthralled by this story, and it feels really significant that it's set in the early 1990s, when there, I think, was a lot less checks and balances. Although I think one of the points of this novel is like asking like how much has really changed in terms of shameless journalists that go out to try to find these stories that that hound people and are trying to weasel information out of them to make a story, rather than, it's not seeking justice necessarily. It may be on the surface trying to seek justice, but really it's trying to get the scoop on this story, so that the journalist in the newspaper gets more attention. And especially it's like quite shocking how it kind of shows how there's basically a complicity between these ruthless journalists and the police and people that are involved in the case, and how they are treated over the course of an investigation like this. And so, and of course, there were many famous cases in the early 1990s in Britain that of people's privacy being invaded, and yeah, lots of accounts like this of journalists that are kind of working with the police in ways which weren't in the best interests of either the general public or the people involved in the case. And so it's so fascinating how it explores a lot of these larger issues through this concentrated story of a family. And Carmel's brother Richie, he suffers with problems to do with alcoholism, and I feel like this novel, the way it explores his alcoholism and his struggles with that, and trying to get sober and trying to regulate his drinking in a way that he can still be productive in his life, is so meaningfully portrayed. I think it's one of like the best portrayals of alcoholism in a novel that I've read since Douglas Stewart's Shuggie Bain. The way that it gives such a human account of this affliction, that I found it incredibly moving reading about his story, but also their father John, who at first seems like quite like a hard character, of really irascible man that just isn't helping his family the way that he should. And the way that we get his backstory in such a complex and interesting way really made me feel for him as well. And there's also such a beautiful tender moment between John and his daughter Carmel towards the end of the book that really almost had me weeping last night. I'm reading about it. So yeah, I think this is a wonderfully structured, really intelligent novel, and how it explores these issues, and how it draws you into the story at first for one reason, and then for a very different reason. And yeah, I just found myself absolutely gripped by it. So like I said, I'd love to know if you've also read this book, and what you think about it, because yeah, Megan Nolan is a real talent. This is the first book I've read by her. I haven't read her debut novel called Acts of Desperation, but I've had it up here. I'll just get it. It's been up here on... Ed O'Brien also fell off as I was trying to... It's funny when you get the the N's and the O's, because it's all a lot of Irish authors. It's there's a lot of O something, but Megan Nolan, who's also Irish, fits next to them as well. Anyway, this was her debut novel, which I've heard a number of accounts that this isn't quite as good as her most recent novel, but I'm still keen to read it now, because I think she's such an excellent writer. So if you've read either of those books, please let me know what you think in the comments below, or let me know about what was the last novel that kept you up reading late at night, and that you found so gripping. I'd love to hear about that as well. But hope you're doing well, and have a good day. I'm gonna go have another big cup of tea now to keep myself awake, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye bye.